Hello and happy time zone all. My name is Louise, also known as the Nerdy Archer, and this is the Rookery's Archives, your one-stop for Assassin's Creed fan community theories, creations and fanfic, with just a little bit of historical appendices tacked on for good measure. After a hiatus of just about a year, maybe a little bit over right now, we are finally back. Burnout, finishing my degree, and someone stealing my content, which is a whole other thing I'm not getting into right now. But the main thing is, the Rookery's Archives is back. We're here. We're finally doing it. I love how I was so optimistic in the updates video about putting content together and showing stuff, and then just didn't for a year. I tried. My degrees are hard. We've had a little bit of a change in direction, but you know what? We're having a fun time with a creative activity today, and that is the main thing. We're here for fun. Now, this is partly inspired by the announcement years ago of the Netflix show being developed. Whenever it moves forward and we hear some information about it, today I thought we'd take a hypothetical look at how we might adapt a game from the franchise into a staged play. And because it's me, I've picked Syndicate. And by this, I mean adapting one of the existing games into the format we might see on the live stage, whether being a play or a musical play. I think, purely because I've never composed music before, we'll focus on the play aspect for now. That's not to say it can't have musical elements, but it's not like the Hamilton variety, where it revolves around musical performances. Now, there are actually a few musicals inspired by video games, Persona 3 and The Trails to Oregon, but we see more musicals becoming video games. Or in the case of Stray Gods, a video game that is a musical. We see books and films adapted into plays and musicals on a regular basis. So why not video games? Why is this one slightly different? And there are now interactive experiences for theatre and musicals and stuff, where you can go and be immersed like you would in a video game in this world that they've created. Many other games to musical adaptations are original tales or their non-canon content. But then you have titles such as the Persona 3, 4 and 5 performances instead, which condense the original games along with a few new bits here and there. Now this is a concept I find myself intrigued by. Like with the Lightning Thief's adaptation from book to stage and now from book to TV, bringing something people know and tweaking it to fit the format sometimes means adding things in, and sometimes it means condensing or leaving things out entirely. Now, the credit for some of the ideas here must go, at least in part, to a friend of mine. When we had a similar conversation about this about 5 years ago, we had some time to kill before we went to see the Assassin's Creed movie when it released in the UK, and parts of this, or the notes that I was able to find on an old phone, are the culmination of that. As with many adaptations, there would be undoubtedly some stuff missing or left out, or just turned into an off-screen action, and this is purely for fun. As much as I'd love to see something like this actually happen, I doubt it, but it's such a fun sandboxy concept to play around with. And why Syndicate? Well, come on, it's me. Proud captain of the Fry Twins Defense Squad. And also, when both my friend Catherine and I were talking through the games, at that point, Origins and After had not been released, because it was January 2017. Syndicate to us just felt to be the game that would fit the concept best. Also, this is the game that actually features an entire assassination mission set in a music hall. And yes, we did have a lot of fun with the Alhambra bit. You'll come to see that in a minute. You can tell how long I've had this scripted before posting, as there was an entire section here that I've just had to remove, addressing the writer's strike that is now obsolete, with the tentative agreement reached at the end of September. I can put it in a pinned comment if people were still interested in it, but it's basically saying that if something happened with announcements about the Writers Guild and strikes calling for a boycott, I would take the episode down or private it until the end of the agreement. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to go back to the beginning. Actually, not even the beginning, entering the building itself as an audience member. Because the best plays and musicals to me make it an experience with the setting. It's the play that goes wrong with the actor playing Chris Bean walking and interacting with audiences as they settle in, asking about the missing dog which becomes relevant during the play. It's Hades Town and going to the stage door to be given one of Orpheus's flowers. It's one way that we could possibly incorporate the modern day segments from the game with Sean's and Beck's. Our announcers? For those who haven't been to a play before, or like me haven't been since the pandemic, usually there's an announcement right as the lights go down for Act 1, and a 5-minute warning before the start of Act 2 to let the audience know that action is about to resume and they should hurry back to their seats. Not the example that I wanted to highlight here, but The Cursed Child did this quite well. It changes depending on whether you are in Act 1 or Act 2 of each part of the play, with one directly addressing audience members as if they were Hogwarts students, or even Hamilton with George III's declaration to his disloyal subjects. Sean and Rebecca here could be talking to the audience as if they were the person heading into the Animus, or even the person using the at-home Abstergo consoles that we see Bishop interacting with in the way that broke the fourth wall for players in the actual games. You could have posters projected onto the back of the set in the waiting area by commissions and merch stands, or even in the programs to break the fourth wall just a little bit more. Which, side note, in the UK, these programs are not free like playbills in the US. These, handy souvenirs are about £5 to £7 here. But it would be a nice little way to immerse people into the experience before they're being introduced to the whole play. And we could even have the ushers wearing Rook's coloured jackets. Oh my god. Oh my god, I really want to see this, but it's probably never gonna happen. Okay, right. Let's get started with Act 1 before I spend the rest of my time hyper-focusing on the details without even talking about the plot. Sequences 1 to 3 and Henry's third letter to the council is where we'll begin. It would be narration over the opening scene. Would that work? Henry's actor behind the scenes talking through the letter, his words slowly becoming Evie's as she reads it to Jacob on the train to London. Skipping Ferris and Elliotson doesn't take away much from the story itself, and we're trying for a 3-hour runtime including a break, at most. It can fit in a few lines of dialogue. Hell, the twins can even walk on stage with the handkerchiefs being stuffed into pockets. Maybe a snide comment about not doing XYZ on the next mission, Jacob? And is their arrival to London not punctuated by Jacob being robbed by a literal child, but instead combining Elliotson's arc? A ragtag bunch of misfits in the newly named Rooks, with working-class employees struggling with the effects of soothing syrup, and over a century of temple control in the capital. In the middle of it all is Mr. Henry Green. He's chipper, perhaps a little tired and worn out from looking after the entire city alone, when he turns, greets them with a quip or a kind word like in the game, and our missions truly begin. Elliotson's assassination is a quick, rushed affair. Perhaps Lucy Thorne is there with Evie hot in her tails, so we get a sort of Spider-Man meme reaction of everyone spotting one another before the stage's equivalent of the Great Escape. Evie finding the notebook in his office, and the insinuation of going for research within Mr. Green. Research, is that what we're calling it now? Do we have the train? There's no K-Lock fight, so to save on having maybe too many sets, I'd assume there'd be something like a small library setup, perhaps implied to be the back room at the curio shop, and then for the next 45 minutes or so, funky times will ensue. Perhaps a few scene changes to Crawford's office, with meetings with Templars like he does between sequences in the game. My brain is thinking of the pacing in a sort of Shakespeare kind of way. This idea of where there are so many players you shouldn't have too many of one person's narrative happening one after another. And let's be honest, Evie deserves equal stage time as her brother. The end of Act 1 would be the fight between Lucy Thorne and Evie at St Paul's Cathedral. It would condense that one and the assassination in the Tower of London purely for time constraints, plus it would leave more time for Henry and their bonding, which I think we really need more of, okay? I want to sell their relationship. Team Henry, come on, they're adorable. I need more. Plus, in terms of trying to keep the staging as minimal as possible, you could reuse bits from the Templar HQ office we see Starrick in, maybe his death with a cloth over the top instead, things like that. And as for how Thorne is assassinated, perhaps we could still do that fake capture, so Evie's march right up to Lucy and then bam, we're having the chat in the White Room. There's some way to parallel Jacob's not so different moment with Roth here in from Act 2. That hunger for knowledge, the wanting to collect the pieces of Eden, only for Lucy Thorne to once again, to almost have a moment where she refuses to accept that she's dead. Or I guess, the first instance of someone being able to interact with the world around them despite the White Room confessions. Lucy is still fighting, then the dramatic cliffhanger, having it possibly go to black with both of them being pulled through the window at the back of the stage. Act 2 could open on a sweet moment with Henry patching her up from her injury at the end of the first act, give some quality Henry content before Jacob waltzes in with some Rooks following a successful gang war. Maybe the other assassination in Act 2 is a little bit quiet. It's almost formulaic. The aftermath not so much, but hey, there has to be a little bit of continuity. It's the same old thing on paper, but it would be a good way to show character development or a change in circumstances. Maybe no slight using Ethan's name to piss Jacob off, but maybe a little foreshadowing comment bringing in the old proverb, the child not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Because the pièce de résistance for the setting of a theatre is the Alhambra sequence. Instead of simply keeping action tied to the stage, you could have members of the cast walking amongst the audience, opening the stage and the experience of a fourth wall breaking scene once again. I think if Act 1 is primarily Evie's, then Act 2 is primarily Jacob's, with this being the pivotal moment for him, the moment which gets the greatest attention, the downfall of his dramatic parallel. Of course, Jacob's in-game mission objective is to find Roth amongst the different copies. So for this performance, they would be throughout the audience. Victorian theatre was very much an informal affair, so actors and performers would be littered throughout the audiences, giving any production the opportunity to flood the floor and mezzanine levels with interactions and give the actors some space for improv. And throughout the room there are 4 masks, 4 men, and Jacob just has to find one. And Jacob's actor would be walking around too, and every so often the pre-recorded shing of blades being drawn could be overheard as he tries each one by one to find his target. Just quick enough for you to think that maybe you misheard the music or maybe you didn't hear anything at all. It's all part of the show. Vaudeville acts on stage or a pretty mediocre magician just trying to keep your attention away. Every so often, lines from both Assassin and Templar would be spoken, and it's up to the audience to keep an eye on where everyone is. In between flowers being handed to couples and children in stands, people performing magic tricks, and can you see Jacob anywhere? Even if he hasn't changed outfit, we're going to make this a little bit of a fun challenge. And after an unspecified amount of times, the house lights then go up, so you can see everything happening. Roth will be talking to the audience, throwing us right into this final act of the showman. And this is all part of the show, right? But then the mask falls away. No Paname circus. Ross relishing in breaking this fourth wall here, and when he misses the dropped rope to the side. He steps forward, or at least continues his path, cackling as the lights turn red, smoke machines turn on, and suddenly the Alhambra is ablaze around you. Side note, we're not actually setting real fires here. We're just giving the illusion of one. It would be very, very clear that this would be fake and not have the real audiences panicking. Roth is still front and centre, and suddenly he's flying upwards, hanging upside down, face to face with Jacob coming out of the gloom in the wings, pulling off his own golden mask. Also, another side note, the one thing I'm really hung up on is this line from Jokes, 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 where it mentions how they danced a murderous duet. I really want to have something here to utilise that, but I just couldn't find anything which didn't just feel absurd and out of place, and that would just take people away from the story in front of them. I know it's probably just a metaphor, but when my friend and I originally talked about this concept, that was one of the details we both talked about, and I can't find it in my notes about what we said about 6 years ago, and it's killing me. Given that Ross actor is literally hanging upside down here, it might be best we speed this confession along slightly. I mean, Ross still getting that full speech from the game because it is something which I feel fully encompasses his utterly batshit attitude. But I don't know about that kiss at the end. It's assault. Let us not ignore that, and it's slightly more uncomfortable if witnessed in person. But we could rewrite something earlier in their meeting, or the specific director's vision for the 2 actors and what they want to imply here. It could make for a strong scene cut. Maybe the kiss happens. Maybe it's just Jacob stepping forward to kill him without a word after that whole why not spiel, and then the lights cut. Then we have our scene change. When the lights go back up, we're in Clara's bar. There's some rooks there already, a couple from outside the Alhambra, and just a few who were there already relaxing their evening away, versus a sullen and confused, prickly Jacob drowning his sorrows at the bar in the centre. And music plays from the piano. And yes, it's Jokes, Jokes, Jokes. For this play, music doesn't tend to appear all that often, usually only during the pivotal moments or when it needs to be heard, or it exists because it isn't front and centre in the same way. This idea came to me from one of Sarah Zed's video essays where they mentioned that, quote, "You sing when you feel too much to speak." Right now, Jacob is in serious pain. So much that the man who has a quip for every innuendo, the personable twin, is now completely rendered silent and in the background of a scene, as a pub evening just continues around him like nothing's happened, barely engaging. There's nothing about his experience which he can talk about, because who around him is going to relate? Who is precisely like him? Have you ever wondered why the track ends so abruptly in Austin Wintory's original recording? It's because here, Evie storms into the bar at that precise moment, fury of the 9 hells abound as she's heard about what happened with the Alhambra, or what the public perception of the event is anyway. The door slams against the back wall and she stalks in. A funny background event of 2 rooks jump the bar to hide on the other side of the stage. And then here we finally come to the once more for all time's sake argument moved from the train. Summer's sequence 9 would also have to be skipped over or inferred. Could Jacob instead be sending Ricks out to find the invitations instead of hunting down the Gladstones himself? Or perhaps Henry beseeches the Maharaja and he finds tickets that way. Henry declines his, our first hint that, like in the Underworld novel, he intends to flee London that evening. The invitation's placed in his hands anyway as his great-uncle departs. Maybe Henry even looks down at it before a long, forlorn glance is placed in the direction that Evie's actress exited the stage. But oh my god, the costuming for Sequence 9 would be amazing. Just think of the dresses. If you've ever watched Phantom of the Opera, think of the masquerade scene. That is the dream for what I want here. Maybe toned down a bit, but we're going for very fancy outfits. Maybe Thorne or Pearl's actress doubles in Act 2 as Queen Victoria here. We can't keep having more and more actors added in, so sometimes this might need to happen, like in Hamilton. Some of the Rooks could also double as Key Templars. You'd be surprised how different people can look in different outfits. Like, I don't know, Twopenny's smart suit and hat being replaced by a Rook with ripped trousers and an absinthe green suit jacket. Sharing the same characteristics perhaps, but not in a fashion. Perhaps they appear once in each of the twins' scenes, again linking them, presenting parallels in the minds of the audience. I bring this up now, as we're finally in the end game. I imagine that there are 4 actors who don't double up during the play: the twins, Henry, and Crawford Starrick. The quote-unquote important ones. Our heroes, our villain, and I hate to just label Henry as merely the love interest, but yeah. Unless you wanted him to double up as George Westhouse, but I think this is cooler that way. I want to keep the dancing bit between Evie and Crawford purely because I love Evie's Bond one-liner afterwards, and I think audiences might get a good laugh out of it as well. Many theatres also have a turntable as part of the floor, or can at least get one installed, giving the scene a new perspective during those, no pun intended, pivotal moments, and Starrick is the one who gets to use it here. More specifically, at the moment of triumph and the lowest point of the hero's arc, its bleakest point. In the vault, forced to the front of the stage by the fight, and side note, I absolutely adore stage combat and I really want to learn it myself, the Templar Grandmaster chuckles and turns. One twin runs and is caught by the outstretched arm with far more power than their weakening selves. Then the other is also brought to their knees. The stage turns, so Starrick is now the one facing us. And as the lights dim and focus on the trio, perhaps all we can see are the twins trying to grab the hand of the other one to comfort each other as they were about to die. And then Crawford Starrick looks up, to us, the audience, and invites us to witness the spectacle, the one, he notes, that we have been watching all evening and have done nothing to prevent. Because here's the thing, the only people who directly address or acknowledge the audiences in this are those who are already dead or are foreshadowing a death. After all, it was the bard himself who said all the world's a stage. So Crawford, standing there with the world at his feet, the room's attention on him, thinks that he's the winner, inviting the audience to watch the twins die for him to get his retribution for their dastardly tricks, noting that the audience led them there and did nothing to prevent them dying. And then, he's not. Starrick is recoiling, letting go of the twins. Henry Green, who has been shown throughout the story to be the absolute sweetheart, not weak but fighting with words and charisma rather than bullets and blades, is there. He's fighting. Running through the main audience or leaping from an upper ledge of the stage, who knows. But Starrick dies, and they win. We get a hug between the twins almost immediately because we were robbed of that from the game. Jake catches a double meaning in something Henry says and leaves stage left to go secure their exit. And here we get the romantic resolution. No, we're not having any kind of forced knighthood ceremony. Perhaps it's mentioned in the program somewhere near the back. But that's where we're going to end it. Both play adaptation and this episode. I'd really appreciate your thoughts on what you think. I've been trying to be a lot more creative with some of the ideas I'm coming up with, and changes or something new is always frightening, but I really hope you enjoyed it. Is there any point from the game which you think would translate well to stage? Anything I added here that you'd rather leave out? Comment, DM me on Twitter as long as it lasts, or talk to me on Discord. All my socials are listed in the description. And I have to thank you all for listening and bearing with me during my hiatus. I tried to keep this episode as short as I could, but once I started writing, all of these ideas just kept stumbling out onto the script, and it ended up being over 7 pages. Would you believe that this isn't even all of the ideas that I had? And if you like this episode, you're more than welcome to stick around. There's a subscribe button somewhere on screen, as well as all previous episodes of the podcast in a playlist, as well as a variety of gaming and archaeo gaming content for your perusal. Once again, thank you all so very much for listening, and I hope to see you coming back to the Rookery soon.